Hi, I'm James, and I paint miniatures.
I cut parts. I glue them together. And I paint them. This is Spoon 37 Minis. Okay, this is What's on the Bench, episode 1. This is a video blog, if you will, of what I'm painting each and every week. It's a bit similar to what I've been posting on Instagram. The difference is on Instagram I usually post like a before and an after picture. This will actually be me painting the miniatures themselves. So it's a little bit different. This is a really good place to start because I have fresh models here. So in the background you can see there's a metal Tyranid hive tyrant, or at least the body of it, from the 1990s, second edition one. And then in the foreground down below I've got most of the gang, but on the actual paint holder I've got a Goliath Gang leader. So I'm just starting to paint him with some Vallejo surface primer in black. Now, I don't want these videos to be super long, so I'm going to mainly focus on the one Goliath Gang leader that I've got here. I'm going to slowly and carefully paint him with primer. The metal hive tyrant will be in a follow-up video which will be posted after this one. So anyway, I'm using Vallejo surface primer in black, which is designed for an airbrush, but I'm just pouring it onto the palette. I'm watering it down ever so slightly and applying it with a number 2 ghost brush, which is a brush with nylon bristles. There's no particular advantage that I know in using this, I just quite like this brush and it seems like the ideal size. You'll notice from the footage that I'm not a particularly fast painter. I'm a self-confessed slow painter. I paint things slowly, carefully, just trying to work the paint in a nice thin layer into each and every crack and crevice, cover every detail, but not in a way that pulls up and obscures all of the details that you've actually paid money for. So just trying to do that. The other thing that this does is it prevents a build-up of errors like bubbles, for example, which I know probably sounds a little bit silly, but it's quite frustrating when you look at a miniature later to do the next coat of paint and then you find this sort of crater in it where you missed a bubble and then it's sort of popped whilst it's setting and there's now a hole in your paint, and it's very difficult then to get rid of that in such a way that's actually satisfactory. It will happen from time to time though, unfortunately. So I suggest a slow method like this, just carefully painting in all the details one by one, and you'll soon see it because it's gradually covering up all of the grey plastic with the colour black. Now, it may not be terribly easy to see, but this paint is extremely thin. It already starts off thin down for an airbrush, so it's actually very thin straight out of the bottle, but then I've added a little bit of water to it to make it even more runny. So what this means is that plastic will show through in any raised area, so it will need a second coat. This is one of the reasons why one of the most common tips when you're painting is to use the ubiquitous 2 thin coats. Normally you wouldn't use multiple coats of primer, but I think as this is so thin, I'm going to have to do so. Now am also trying to show the model to the camera. I know I've kind of got it off to one side at the moment, but I'm just trying to make sure you can see what I'm painting, see that I'm having to rotate the model all over the place. Periodically you'll see me turn it literally upside down to make sure that I've painted, for example, under the arm, under the handle of this mallet that the guy's got, that sort of thing, just to make sure that I've covered absolutely every angle. Again, I just want to make sure that there is this primer all over the model so that it will set up the model for a good colour coat, no matter what colour and what area of the model that I'm painting. And if I do miss anything in the final painting of the model, at least it will have black paint on it somewhere, so there won't be a bit of grey plastic peeking through that you then have to feel that you've got to correct. Fun fact, this is actually my very first time using the Citadel Miniatures painting handles. May be obvious because they're completely clean, they've never actually been used until this day, but people have been suggesting for some time on Instagram that I actually start using these things. They're okay. I have found one or two limitations whilst I've been doing this, though. They are extremely top heavy, particularly with the metal model on top. With the plastic it's not too bad, but even so, if you're not careful picking them up, you can have the whole thing tip over on the workbench, and then that can, again with the metal model in particular, that can chip the paint, so do be careful what you're doing. Still, they were cheap and they solve a problem, so I'm not having to handle a model with paint on it or find endless old paint pots to stick things on top of, which is what I have been doing up till now. This black primer is not the final colour. Obviously, if you look at the box art for Necromunda Goliaths, they wear kind of red armour plates and all kind of industrial looking gear, and they've got a lot of flesh showing, but obviously this is just meant to be like a foundation that the other paints will stick to. So that's just why I'm painting the whole model black. I mean, it does look kind of cool when it's all black, but that's not meant to be final at all. You may also wonder why I'm not using a quicker method like a spray can or an airbrush, obviously with this product being made for an airbrush. Well, the airbrush one is slightly simpler to answer. I literally don't have an airbrush right now. I might get one in the future, but at the moment I don't have a compressor, I don't have an airbrush, so that one's a non-starter. I would normally use a spray primer. The only problem, what a lot of people don't realise, is that spray cans have a working temperature range, and it's December, it's freezing cold outside, and I normally like to do my spraying outdoors so I don't have to get the paint fumes indoors, which is generally a good idea. Anyone you live with will tell you that, trust me. And then what I found is the actual spray can needs it to be at least 10 degrees C outside, and at the moment it's between 0 and 2, so if I try to use a spray can I'm not going to get anywhere, and this, though it does take longer, it just allows me to paint things indoors, in the warm, no fumes, no overspray, no problems, and I can just carry on painting, where otherwise I'd be like, you know, oh, I've got to wait for a warmer day, or I have to contrive some method of using spray paint inside the house, which I'm not super keen on doing. The other thing about that is I really wanted to show this on a video, because of course a lot of people will show you how to use an airbrush, or they'll show you how to use a spray can, which would be the more normal way of doing things, whereas I actually want to show you something different. I want to show you something that not every miniature painter is going to do. So by showing you that you can take this primer designed for an airbrush, but you can actually also just use an ordinary brush and apply it by hand, even if it's too cold to use a spray can or too hot to use a spray can, or whatever reason you may have for not using a spray can or an airbrush, you can still prime your models. So if anybody tells you that they can't use primer on their models, then they haven't tried this. So you can see I'm just trying to paint the pants area. What I'm trying to do is get the brush into the cracks and crevices around the armor plates, because there's actually a sort of void there that you won't be able to see when the miniature's done, but if you don't paint it now, it will show up as grey plastic later on. So even though you can't really paint it a colour, or well, you could try, but it's so close to the trousers that you're either painting the trousers or the armor plate, not both. So I carefully paint around those details, and then I paint the edges, and then I paint the tops of them. So like I'm painting the top of the armor plate right now. And you see how the paint's sufficiently runny that it just goes around all of the raised details and flows into the recesses almost like a wash. So that gives you some idea of just how thin this is. Okay, so here's where I started to discover one of the other limitations of using a paint handle. I'm just painting these Sector Mortalis scenic bases, which are very good, by the way. Lots and lots of detail on these things, lots of cracks and crevices to get the paint into, and I'm sure you can go to town with painting the details. The only thing is the edges of the base are being gripped by the paint holder, so if you don't want to get paint on it, you're very limited in what you can do in terms of painting the edges of the base. Now this does mean at some point you're either going to have to contrive some other way of holding the base, perhaps from underneath, I know I've done this in the past with an old paint pot and some poster putty on top of it, so you just stick the base down onto that and you can paint all the way around the edge without a problem. Or the sort of old-fashioned way of doing things, where you just hold the model in your fingers and just paint around the edge of the base whilst you're holding a different part of the model. Essentially, I don't particularly like doing that because if your fingers aren't spotlessly clean, you can mark or dirty up the surface of the paint. So I prefer to find other ways of holding the base or some other method if I can. If not, that does work, it's just not my preferred method. But yeah, once I've got this base done, yeah, you can see I'm just trying to paint the top of the edge. It's not ideal, but that's pretty much it. So yeah, here he is when he's dry, and that's the primer done.
Right, if you enjoyed that, hit like, hit subscribe, hit the little bell icon so you get notifications, so you know when the next video's out. Hopefully it will be soon.